Hello and welcome to Rolling with the Punches. Bit of a special episode this week. We normally just do the fight cards, but there has been some interesting news, we'll say today. Slightly disappointing news, but we'll get on to it. This week I'm joined by Chris instead of Quinn.
Oh yeah.
Chris, for those of you who haven't seen our other videos or don't know, is another member of the Roller Sevens team and another fan of combat sports.
Yes, I am.
Not so much a fan of blood, but you'll see that later down the line.
Yeah, sometimes a bit. Yeah. A little bit much.
So the news we're reacting to today is Khamzat Chimaev has just announced his retirement. He's just 26 years old. He's made a storming start in the UFC. Went 3-0 under the UFC banner in a matter of about 2 months.
Yeah.
Set the record for the sort of the quickest turnaround between fights in the modern era. Just 10 days between beating John Phillips and Reece McKee, 2 different weight classes.
Yeah, that's
Couldn't have looked more impressive off the bat, and the UFC seemed to think so as well. They booked him in a fight against Leon Edwards, the number 3 welterweight contender, which has unfortunately had to be rescheduled, twice and then cancelled on the third occasion because of Khamzat Chimaev suffering with COVID. Now seems to have got to the point where it's just taking his toll, and he's announced he's hanging up his gloves. The Instagram post this morning he put out, which kind of seconded by his manager, seems to suggest, I think the exact words he says are "I'm done."
Yeah.
Seems to suggest he's not coming back. Very disappointing news. I mean, like I say, he's such a hot up and comer, and really interested to see what he would have done in the future. Only earlier this week he was talking about fighting Neil Magny in June. So, I mean, Chris, what's your thoughts now? What's your thoughts on him as a fighter?
I mean, him as a fighter, he's impressive, isn't he?
Yeah.
Like, just from what you've seen in the UFC, anyway, he's dominant. He came into that with a 6-win streak.
Yeah. He's completely unbeaten in his MMA career so far.
Boy, wasn't he impressive?
Oh,
Like
it's
his
crazy,
opponents looked scared.
Physically
There were
should be in
points
the
when
ring.
they looked scared. That his third match didn't last long enough, really.
Yeah.
You had the guy back away, but then one strike, and that was.
Yeah,
Like,
actually right.
He's very dominant. It would be disappointing if he were to
I find it
retire
crazy
now,
for people to bow out the sport so young. MMA is not really one of those sports that pays you enough to get out early, but I suppose if you've got to the point where you can't fight anymore, or can't train anymore even.
Well, yeah, I mean that was it, wasn't it? Because the decision or the announcement came after a training session, wasn't it? So,
supposedly, yes. I mean, that's what Dana White has said. I don't know if Chimaev has confirmed that himself. But Dana seems to suggest he sort of started to try to train when he wasn't supposed to. But actually, Dana kind of released a statement of his own, and they essentially said along the lines that Chimaev is supposed to be resting, relaxing. They've got him on a course of drugs to try and clear this lung problem of his. He thinks that Chimaev's gone in to try and train, couldn't do it, and is just doing this on emotions. But this is the same Dana White who refuses to believe that Khabib's retired, and I tend to believe the fighter over the manager myself. I mean, do you think this is a permanent thing?
I mean, at the end of the day, like, you would hope Dana White has the fighter's best interests at heart, but at the same time, like, he's going to know his body better than the promoter.
Oh yeah,
he's going to know the body better than anyone.
Yeah, I mean, him and his team, they spend so much time together, and you always do that as a combat sports athlete. You live your whole life in the gym. They probably know more about you than your own family.
That's the thing you see, and he's dominant and he's extremely fit.
Yeah.
So for something like this to knock him to the point of being like, because that was only a few months ago.
Yeah, I mean, I believe he made his UFC debut in July of last year. Fought again in July of last year, 10 days later, and then fought Meerschaert in the September.
What was it, 66 days?
Something like that.
Fights, something like that.
Yeah, a couple of months.
But between all 3 fights, and then, that was 6 months ago?
September was his last fight against Meerschaert. He was then booked to fight Edwards in November. But that was called off under the announcement that he had COVID. And I mean, these COVID announcements have happened a lot in the UFC since it's gone on. Yeah. Regardless of their bubble, it still seems to be getting in.
Which is
most of them,
but
I mean, most of them are kind of blinked through it, and I know it affects everyone differently, and that seems to have been the case. We've just got used to fighters having COVID, not really noticing, and then coming back a couple of weeks later.
That's the thing. I mean,
but Chimaev seems to be one of those ones who's suffering from long COVID. Obviously, the effects none of us really know of yet. We're not science people. It's. I'd like Dana White to be right. I really hope that it's not the end of Chimaev's career, because I've not really seen a more impressive prospect. I mean, I know we mentioned recently Quinn was of the opinion that Michael Chandler had made the most impressive debut we've seen. There's certainly a case to be made for that, but I think the way that Chimaev's come in and continue to dominate, he's looked better and better in every performance.
I mean, he's just really exciting to watch. I mean, granted, his first 2 opponents may not have necessarily had that much experience under their belts either.
No, I think both of them were debuting fighters in the UFC.
But I mean, there comes a point where it no longer looks like they're trying to guard. It looks like they're actually cowering. And it came a point in both of those fights, and the first one obviously went on a fair bit longer. But for the majority of it, I mean,
I mean, John Phillips in his first fight, the state of him after the first round, you don't see people like that after a 5-round beating. I mean, Max Holloway recently put over 700 strikes on Kelvin Kattar. Kelvin Kattar didn't look that bad after 5 rounds of that.
But I mean, he was just raining blows, wasn't he? I mean, there were several times when it looked to me, at least, like he could well have like locked them in a choke a lot sooner. But he seems to, and his second fight, like his opponent was turning into it a lot more. So fair enough, like lose the grip, go back to wailing. But it certainly seems like he gets them, and then he decides against it. He just wants to rain a few more blows.
Session for him,
a bit of a training session, a bit of a showcase maybe. I mean, he is making a name, or he was certainly coming in to make a name for himself. And, I'd say certainly.
No, I mean the way they booked him, he went from fighting 3 unranked fighters, and they were going to chuck him in against Leon Edwards, who's the number 3 welterweight in the world, and they fight with a streak of his own. It hasn't lost since he lost to Kamaru Usman kind of 6-7 years ago. So it's crazy how quickly he was shooting up the ladder. I think he's probably the best prospect we've seen in MMA maybe since John Jones. Very disappointing news. Obviously, if we get any more updates on it, we'll be back to let you know. At the moment, it seems to just be Dana hoping it will come back, but maybe he is right. Maybe Chimaev was just feeling upset, kind of get to grips with things. I know he's been flown out, especially UFC are paying for his medical treatment in America, flown him out for the specific purpose of getting this done, which they don't just do for anyone.
No, I mean, and also at the end of the day, I mean, looking from where he's coming, this is a guy who seems to like fighting regularly, and not only has he had 6 months out for now from an actual bout, but the past 3 months he's not been able to train properly. If it was a case where we went to a training session, he was like, granted, like the steroids I think he's on for it, for the lung disease is probably inhibiting his ability. But I mean, if he's going to training and he's like, I can't even train how I want to, or even train like a fraction, I can completely understand how that would be disheartening.
Very demoralising.
And maybe the fact of once he rests up a bit and he's like, you know what?
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about someone who did quite literally live in the gym at one point. I think he seems to love fighting. It's his world. His whole kind of team is built around it, social circle. So not being able to be part of that, I can understand, like you said, why it would be kind of very disheartening.
And he looked incredibly fit in those first
matches, I mean, at the start of it, he was still continuing to train, and there was a kind of a worrying news story out. Essentially, he'd been to his training session, trained for the afternoon. Afterwards, he just collapsed completely. Couldn't move for sort of 14 to 18 hours, and it seems to have just been getting progressively worse since then. So doesn't look great. And I mean, we don't, as I say, we don't know the long-term effects of COVID. There was word he might be around July, but I think that's just guesswork from everyone and wishful thinking from the promoter. So I think Khamzat maybe realising that he couldn't meet that deadline has been sort of wiping his hands of it, but we'll see. But as I say, we'll keep you updated if there's any further news on it. Next time we'll be back on will be Saturday. We're with you for the UFC 259 pre-fight show. Big one this week. 3 titles on the line. 4 champions competing. So we might be making this one a little bit longer. But make sure you join us, guys. And if you like catching up on MMA news, fight cards, reviews, that kind of thing, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell icon for news as soon as it comes up. From me, Bez, and from you, Chris. See you soon.
See you soon.